Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Town of Southern Shores regular Town Council meeting for October the 4th, 2022. If you'll all please join me now in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would ask just for a moment of silence now, please. Thank you. Council, we have the opportunity to adopt our agenda or amend it at this time. Anybody have any amendments, or can I hear a motion to adopt our agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Everyone in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We have an agenda. Thank you, Council. On our consent agenda, we have 2 budget-related items and the approval of the minutes. Any problems with providing us with a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
And a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Hearing no discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have an approved consent agenda. We are extremely excited and pleased to welcome back to our town our wonderful auditor, Teresa Osborne. Thanks for coming tonight, Teresa. Good to see you.
For that lovely introduction.
Absolutely.
I'm sort of at that time where I'm in between trying to figure out if I can see with or without these. So we're going to see how this works. So I'm here tonight to present the results of your June 30th, 2022 annual audit. The town has received what's called an unmodified opinion on its financial statements, and that is the best opinion that you can receive on your statements, and that's outlined on pages 1 to 3 of the financial statements. I will tell you that that letter used to only be 2 pages long. The AICPA and the powers that be have lengthened that to 3 pages. It's just got it's got a few more disclaimers in it than it used to have, but still the same overall opinion. That opinion confirms that your financial statements are presented fairly in accordance with generally accepted accounting standards. Additionally, there were no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses noted, and this is outlined in the internal control report, which is on pages 59 to 60 of your financial statements. So the audited financial statements are about 60 pages long. And so that I'm not here with you all night, I'm going to just pick out a few highlights for you tonight. Believe it or not, we're really going to be able to see where the town stands looking at pretty much just 2 of these statements. The report begins with what is called the management discussion and analysis on pages 4 through 10. You may find this to be a more user-friendly summary of the town's finances, and it includes some discussion and analysis that you might not get from just looking at the financial statements and the numbers. So that might just be something you want to go back and highlight after the meeting. Exhibits 1 and 2 on pages 11 and 12 are what we call the government-wide full accrual financial statements. Typical government financial statements do not include fixed assets and debt. But I'm going to say it's probably about 10 years ago they came up with this thing called GASB 34, where they decided governments needed to present their financial statements more like businesses. And that's where they came up with these government-wide financial statements. And that's what you're going to find on exhibits 1 and 2. Again, typically the statements that you get monthly, and what I consider to be the good statements that you need to be making decisions with, they're not going to have the fixed assets and debt on it. So I'm going to come back to those two exhibits in just a few minutes. I'm going to start tonight on pages 13 and 14. These are what are called your governmental fund statements. So if I could get you to join me on those 2 pages. You'll notice on page 13, there are 4 columns across the top. These statements are divided between what is known as major funds and non-major funds. And we decide that based on how big the assets are of that fund, how big the revenues are, how much there is in expenses. And sometimes you might not have enough in assets or revenues and expenses. And some agency says, we want you to, even though this might be a minor fund, we want you to show it as a major fund. And that happened this last year with the American Rescue Plan funds that you all got. That might typically not meet the definition of a major fund, but because of the type of money that it is, the government said that they wanted us to show those as a major fund. So over on the balance sheet, you'll see under major funds, you've got general fund and capital project fund. You don't see the special revenue fund there, which is your ARPA money, because you didn't have any, you weren't holding on to any cash at the end of the year, but you do see that over on page 14. You see the general fund, the capital project fund, and the special revenue fund. That special revenue fund is your ARPA fund, American Rescue Plan funds. Again, the reason you see it you don't see it on the balance sheet is because there was no money there at the end of the year, but you see it on page 14 because you actually had revenue come in and it went back out in the same year. That non-major fund, that's your cemetery fund. So over on page 14 in the first column under the general fund, and I also want to add that even though we call it the general fund, North Carolina general statutes require you to combine your capital reserve fund with your general fund. So that general fund includes both of those. If you go down towards the bottom, it says net change and fund balance. Your revenues over your expenses in your general fund, again, which includes the capital reserve fund, was $3,306,528. Off the cuff, that's going to sound like a whole lot of money to you, and you might say, why were we so much revenues over expenses? But there's some actually very good reasons for that last year. As you all recall, last fiscal year was when you implemented your municipal service district taxes, 1 and 2, or A and B, I can't remember how you refer to them. And you also did the 4-cent town-wide beach nourishment tax last year. So that 4-cent town-wide and the MSD A and B brought in about $1.7 million last year that didn't get spent last year because you implement that in the year before you have your first debt payment. So of that $3.3 million, $1.7 million of that is actually from those taxes, and that's sitting in your capital reserve fund at June 30th. In addition to that, you received $471,354 in American Rescue Plan funds. Again, those were not budgeted, but those were received, and they were transferred into the general fund to offset police salaries and benefits. You all probably remember doing a project resolution sometime last year where you decided how you were going to use that money. In addition to that, you took $233,000 from your bond funds. When you all first started doing beach nourishment, you were paying for those expenses out of your general fund. And then you got your bond debt last December, and you were able to take $233,000 out of that bond money and reimburse the general fund for the expenses that were fronted by the general fund. So that's another $233,000 that rolled into the general fund. And then lastly, shared revenues came in over budget by approximately $900,000. That would be your occupancy tax, your sales tax, and your occupancy sales and land transfer tax. So when you all were working on your budget in May of 21, you hadn't finished fiscal year 21. So you didn't fully know what an amazing year that was going to be. And that just ended up being a phenomenal year. And that really rolled into fiscal year 21, 22 as well. tourism remained very strong, and property sales remained very strong as well. So again, those numbers came in over budget. On page 13, again, this is 13 is the balance sheet that matches up with the revenue and expenses. If you look in the first column on page 13, down towards the bottom, you can see that your total fund balances are $11,571,941. And you can see how that's broken down. $2,186,000 of that belongs to the Capital Reserve Fund. That's the biggest piece of it. $2 million of that is what's called stabilization by state statute. That's revenues that you have recognized as income at June 30th, but you didn't actually receive the money until July or August. So even though you've recognized it as revenue, North Carolina says, we're not really going to let you call that unassigned because you didn't actually have the cash in hand at June 30th. But what that leaves you with in your unassigned is $6,557,121. That's an increase over the prior year of $1,368,005. The primary reason for this increase are the things that I just mentioned: the ARPA funds, the beach nourishment expenses, and the revenues over budget. That unassigned fund balance represents 110% of total general fund expenses for last fiscal year. The town has a fund balance policy that requires a minimum of $3 million. So that $6 million is, significantly above that amount. Certainly gives you some flexibility as you move forward and make decisions. So back to the Exhibit 1 and Exhibit 2 that I was telling you about. What we do is we take Exhibit 3 and 4 and we convert that over to what we call the government-wide financial statements, which is Exhibit 1 and 2. And you'll see at the bottom of Exhibit 3 and 4, there's these conversion schedules there that shows how we add the debt and the fixed assets to Exhibit 1 and 2. So Exhibit 1, which is the balance sheet, the government-wide balance sheet, that's on page, I think it's page 11. Yeah, page 11. You can see there that you've got all of your debt included here. You've got your bond debt, and you also have your actuarially determined liabilities for post-employment benefits for things like pension and retiree health insurance. You can see those liabilities are going to be detailed on page 38 of the notes to the financial statements. And I just always like to mention that although the liabilities for the law enforcement officer special separation allowance and the retiree health insurance, they're required to be reported in your financial statements, there is no funding requirement. There's no law that says that you have to set that money aside. The LGC has started recommending that local governments maybe take a look at that and decide, is it time to start setting that money aside? I'll tell you that not a whole lot of governments have done it, because there's that money is very restricted. Once you put it into a trust fund, you can't ever get it back out. Just a lot of rules you got to follow. It might be something that we find becomes mandatory as time goes on, but right now it's not. Overall, I just want to say that the town ended the year in very strong financial condition. I would like to thank Bonnie and the rest of the staff for their assistance with the audit, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Teresa.
Okay.
I see it's still pending to the LGC. Has that been?
It is still pending. It has been submitted to them, and I would expect sometime over the week or 10 days, we'll hear back from them. And generally, it would just be like a format. They're never going to question the numbers that are in here. It might just be a formatting question or something that they may have. I've never had any that were not approved the first time. So just a process that we've got to go through.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions for Teresa?
Nope, okay, good.
We're glad there's no majors or minors.
Thank y'all very much.
Thanks, Teresa,
You don't
very,
see
very
that
much.
very often.
Next on our agenda is staff reports. We have our staff report from our Deputy Town Manager, Planning Director, Wes Haskett. Good evening, Wes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I have a brief report for y'all tonight for the month of September. With respect to permits, there were a total of 55 permits issued that consisted of 9 zoning permits, 25 building permits. One of those was for a new construction, 17 trade permits, 3 lot disturbance stormwater management permits, 1 lot disturbance demolition permit. And the total amount of fees that were collected in September was $22,327.30. With respect to code enforcement in September, there were 11 warning citations issued for solid waste violations, and 1 warning citation was mailed for a fallen tree over a canal. Moving on to, with respect to land use plan update, with respect to where we are there, we are looking at scheduling the community kickoff day meeting with the consultant, or meetings rather, with the consultant on November 15th. That has not been finalized yet. That day would consist of a joint planning board town council meeting, possibly a department head meeting, a community tour with the consultant. And then that would also, that evening, that would be the day of the first public workshop meeting with the consultant. Again, the project schedule has not been finalized, and once it has been, we will make sure that it's posted on the website so that everyone can see and plan accordingly. With respect to the planning board will be meeting tomorrow, actually, here at 1 p.m. For a special meeting. And the purpose of the special meeting is for the board performing the duties of the town's Board of Adjustment to hold a public hearing to consider APA-2201, an appeal application submitted by Adam Ward to appeal the zoning administrator's decision to deny approval of a recombination plat for the property located at 55 Skyline Road. The board will also meet on October 17th here in the Pitt Center at 5 p.m. At that meeting, the board will discuss potential commercial design standards, and they may consider the ZTA 2208 from Casey Varnell on behalf of Pleasure Palace CDEC, the one that was submitted back in, I believe, July or August, and has been pushed back and pushed back. Lastly, the Historic Landmarks Commission, they may be meeting on October 25th. I reported at the last council meeting that there was a certificate of appropriateness application submitted by Courtney Clements for 23 Porpoise Run. That meeting was pushed back from last month, and it may be pushed back again. That's why I say they may meet on October 25th. We'll know for sure by the beginning of next week. Any questions?
Nope.
I'm sorry, I was writing while you said this. The next planning board meeting date and time, regular planning board meeting date and time is?
October 17th at 5 o'clock. And then the special meeting is tomorrow at 1 o'clock.
Got it.
Wes, I just have one question. In the whole scheme of things, this is pretty minor, but there are so many trash cans that have been turned over on Ocean Boulevard. I mean, scads of them ever since last week. Are the rental companies at all cooperative about going to pick those up? I mean, the houses are empty. That's pretty obvious.
Some of them are.
Yeah. Can
Some
we
of
give you
them
the
are.
names of some of them that don't appear to be very cooperative? I mean, they're in the, I don't know, the officers, they're in the road, people are pulling them out. It just,
Oh, I've moved a bunch of them the other day.
yeah, I mean, it just seems like, we've had 2 storms and that's bad, but just some cooperation in getting those cans off the road would be
Yes,
very
ma'am.
appreciated.
We'll see what we can do.
Okay, okay.
Would some sort of written request letter from the town to individual property owner companies, property management companies?
Blast it out through their association.
Okay.
I think the challenge there is getting the renters to understand to bring some of them back too. They get there as a turnover, and I'll see cars there, and they're still out there. Matter of fact, Sunday, somebody was trying to put some over on, while I was on the north, going north, put them on the west side instead of having it out on the east side so the truck could pick it up.
I mean, it just seems that there should be some protocol when you have a big storm come through town and they're trash cans and they just lay there for days.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there should be some protocol that these rental companies
There's still
follow.
some down here at the end. They've got, most of them are picked up, I think, but there's some down here at the end yet.
Yeah, anyway, just a minor point. I'm glad that's the only storm damage we had, but
Yes, ma'am.
Wes, anything from the activity at Marketplace?
They, as you can see, the walls are going up. They've done more work in the parking lot. We have been in communication with not only the property owner, but a company that represents the shoe store, where the contractor that's doing work now, for that store, they're building the shell of the store, and then another company's going to come in and do the upfit, the work inside and the interior. So there will be a separate building permit issued for that store. But things are moving along there very well, and I think they look to be in there March or April.
oh, great.
Marshalls would like to be in there by March or April.
Wow. And still pretty quiet on the complaint front? In other words, people aren't calling you?
No, ma'am,
Okay.
I have not heard of any complaints since I spoke with you last meeting.
Terrific.
Yes, ma'am.
That's great to hear. Okay, thank you. Anybody else have a question for Wes?
What was the tentative date of that public workshop, the land use plan?
Tentative date is November 15th.
Oh, good.
And we will be in touch with y'all, obviously, if that's the day we're going to be able to make work for everyone.
Just want to make sure I'll be here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wes.
Thank you,
Wes.
Wes.
Appreciate it. Next week, we're going to hear from our police chief, Chief David Cole. Good evening, Chief Cole.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. The Police Department report for September 2022. You can see the calls for service. We had 1,491 compared to 1,670 the prior year. A lot of that is the CRO is pretty much done. So there's a little bit less activity there. And also there's not as many businesses to check as there was the year before. As you can see, under the incidents, which were the actual crimes reported, we had 2 breaking and entering, 1 larceny. We had 3 vandalism, 7 that were drug related that also involved drug equipment. We had 1 communicating threats, 1 forgery. We had the airplane crash, 1 found property, and I'll get a little bit into the airplane crash at the end here. 1 found property. We had 4 requests for our K9 and 2 hit and runs for a total of 23 offenses. You can see we had 6 criminal arrests. 7 of those were for all the drugs and the drug equipment related, and the communicating threats for a total of 8 charges. Officers, they conducted 94 traffic stops. And out of that, they hand out 23 written citations and another 55 warning citations. There were 24 local ordinance violations, and we had 9 motor vehicle accidents for the month of September. Just a couple of quick things to note, and I'm sure the fire chief may hit on some of these things. The trash cans, yeah, our officers pulled a lot of them out of the road during the storm. And did not take them up to the house, but they got them out of the road, mostly on the midnight shift. And as far as the last storm we had some high water, but I think because we haven't had as much rain, it didn't pool as long. And we had 2 or 3 pretty good sized trees come down. In the fire department, and I give kudos also to David Bradley and Public Works, they did a very good job of clearing up the road and getting it open quickly. Let's see. As you already know, for the most part, we had a two-man aircraft, which was an ultralight that had unfortunately had experienced some kind of a malfunction and ultimately crashed about a half a mile out into the ocean in the area of 120. Duck Road. And without getting into a lot of the specifics, I can tell you that the fire department, EMS, and Dare Central, and I won't get into all the specifics because I'll end up forgetting or leaving someone out, but they did a tremendous job considering the circumstances. Locally, a little more frustrated with the other entities from the government. But I commend the 2 local divers that we were finally able to get. One was through the fire department and one was through Merrick from Ocean Rescue. They did a tremendous job of recovering the victim, which was important to all of us to give the family some closure. Cliff set up a debriefing and after action meeting that all of us met and talked it out, talked through it. Some of the things that were short-ended that we need to prepare for in the future, hopefully that we never have to use again, but that, some of the shortcomings that we noted. And ultimately, we finally found out that the actual people that investigate these are the NTSB. It's not the New York or the Highway Patrol. It's not the state police. It's not the SBI. It's not the Coast Guard. And it's not the FAA. And it's not, we got a phone number to call, and it was the United States Air Force. And they said, yeah, we investigate them, but not commercial or not private ones. So ultimately, we finally turned it over to the NTSB, and we have not heard another word. So, and that was about a week and a half ago. Any questions?
Has that group been on site?
Pardon?
Has that NTSB group been on site?
Not that I'm aware of, but by the time, one of the comments they made was when we told them the type of aircraft, they said that it probably didn't have insurance, so I don't even know if they were going to show up because it was just going to be a recovery. But I can tell you, if this crash had happened the next day, it would have been a lot different because it was kicking as it was then, but it was even worse the next day. And I can guarantee you that the aircraft had, when they had pulled the parachute to try and pull it up with him in it, it snapped. And he went down about 22 feet. 2 other people I want to commend are Weeks Marine, their boats, their surveying boat. Unbelievable. They did an awesome job. They were able, with the sonar they had, they popped a line and the 2 divers went right down and right there, right on top of it. So they did a remarkable job. So it was
Did the aircraft, did they rent it, or was one they, or did the people own it?
to the best of our knowledge, we located their 2 vehicles. They were at first flight at the airstrip there. They were from Lansing, Pennsylvania, and it was their aircraft. And the gentleman who didn't make it was actually a pilot. I believe he was a helicopter pilot too. So, yeah, it was an unfortunate.
I just would add, I was on the beach during most of this time, and I was just amazed and so impressed at the community effort from, I couldn't begin to name everybody who was there. And I would like to see our council recognize some of these people, particularly those 2 divers who were just individual citizens who I know heard you call them on the phone and to ask them to come over. And I'm just so I don't know, Mayor, maybe you could work with the police chief and come up with a list of people that we need to say thank you to.
Yeah. And I also would like to commend the volunteer fire department chaplain. She did an awesome job. The victim's wife wanted to come to the scene, and our officer and the chaplain were able to keep them at the hospital, because the last thing we wanted them to do is to come to the scene and just watch us standing there waiting for.
Right. But I think thanks to Weeks Marine, because they were definitely out there.
Yep. Anything else?
Nope.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief Cole. Chief Limbacher? Good evening, Ed.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. While we're on the topic, I think the chief basically covered it all, but I will say that we're pretty fortunate to just have 2 divers actually in the fire department. That it's not a task we normally do, but we do have a guy that's been diving for 30 years. He's a certified instructor. He teaches it. And he happens to be our treasurer. So a phone call away, which was very, very nice because we were having some difficulty, but it was nice to get that victim out of the water for the family. So does anyone have any questions for me regarding that? I'll just say, I thought the incident went as well as possible. Obviously, us and the police worked very well together, but all the other agencies I thought locally did a good job.
And just to point out, the two divers, they're totally volunteer. They were under no obligation to say yes when we called them. They totally did it all on their own.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So if there's no more questions on that, I'll get into the fire department report for the month of September. That's actually wrong. It's 67. There's one report that's not closed out because the structure fire report's not done yet for Martin's Point. But going through it, there were 2 structure fires. One was in Kitty Hawk and one was in Martin's Point last month. 1 vehicle fire, 30 EMS calls, 1 extrication or rescue, which I might add was just not really funny, but a guy was on his roof and the ladder just collapsed. He was on the roof, so he didn't get hurt or anything. He just couldn't get off the roof. So he just needed a ladder. So I'm sure his wife will never let him live that down. But anyway, he was fine, so nothing happened to him. But the water accident or the water rescue was actually the glider, 1 or 2 gas leaks, 1 electrical equipment, 1 power line down, 7 service calls, which are either wheelchairs or our sign program, 3 public service, 1 assistant police or other agency, which was the fire marshal's office, 1 public service, 2 dispatch canceled en route, 1 smoke scare odor or smoke, 1 hazmat with no hazmat, and 11 alarms, including 1 CO and 1 citizen complaint. And that's all. It compares to last year was 59, so we're a little ahead. Any other questions?
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
As always, we appreciate all the volunteer efforts and professional efforts. Next, we'll hear from our town manager, Cliff Ogburn. Good evening, Cliff.
Thank you. I can't stand up here without also thanking the police chief and the fire chief for the work from the very beginning to the very end of that day throughout the entirety. They did an outstanding job. And so I'm just very thankful for the 2 of them and that they're here and supporting us. There is a long list of folks that were there and supported that day. There was one other I'll mention, the TI Coastal was a survey boat. And I'm mentioning that because both of them told me not to forget how valuable those guys were. So there's a lot of folks to thank, and we'll do that moving forward. On my agenda, I had the vacant lot right beside you, right behind you. It's really just to keep that on your radar. As you know, that lot was purchased back in 2015. It's zone government, institutional, G&I. We've started making some discussion about what we might potentially do with that lot. One of the things we've talked about is a community garden that's gained some interest. The SSCA has mentioned interest there. The Outer Banks Community Foundation has. And so I'm not suggesting we do anything with that right now, but I do just want to make sure one of the things I was taught early on, no surprises. So if you're hearing discussion about that lot, that's kind of where it's coming from. On beach nourishment, we had our first public input meeting last week. There were about 13 here in this room. It was the first time it had been in Southern Shores. We had about 13 people total. Most of those were online. Had some really good questions. So here's the latest. Before the dredging can start, there has to be some surveys. They have to do before dredge surveys, and then of course it's dredged, and then they survey to see the quantity that was put. Ours was done more than 10 days ago, and 10 days have expired, so we have to resurvey. The 2 dredges are supposed to start coming back and be here either late Wednesday night or early Thursday morning, but the survey boats are probably going to take a little bit longer to get that work done before we can dredge. So right now, both dredges will go to Kitty Hawk. They've got about 5,000 feet they have to finish there. As soon as our beach is surveyed, then the Magdalene, the bigger of the two, will come to 60 Ocean Boulevard and start pumping south. I've stood up here 4 or 5 times and told you the dredge is coming, and this is number 6. So if they start Monday, they're supposed to finish in 40 to 45 days, and that would take them right up until Thanksgiving Day. And then, of course, they have to go to Duck and be done by the end of December. So they've got their work cut out for them. But that's the latest news as of this morning.
Provided there's no more storms
Correct.
Or equipment breakdown.
or equipment, yeah.
So that's all I got.
Thank you, Cliff.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions for Cliff?
Good.
Okay, thank you very much. Next on our agenda is the opportunity for our town attorney to address us. Good evening, Philip.
Thank you. I would like to bring you guys an update on the Mid-County Currituck Bridge litigation, which remains pending in the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals in Richmond. On Monday, October the 3rd, the Fourth Circuit advised us that oral arguments in this case would be scheduled for the December 6th through 9th argument session. The attorneys are being directed to inform the court of any conflicts by October 11th, and will later be informed of the specific date between the 6th and the 9th that arguments will be heard. This is the first real development since we filed our amicus brief in mid-June, and we'll report any further developments to the council as they occur.
That's excellent news. Thanks, Philip.
Great.
It's
Wonderful.
moving.
Appreciate it.
And I also am here to answer any questions. The manager advised me there may be some questions about the recent U.S. Supreme Court decision in Reed versus Gilbert about content neutral signs.
Maybe once we get to the public hearing about signs, unless somebody has a question now they want to.
Probably not. until-
It's pretty
Yeah.
straightforward, and I sent Cliff an email, which may be
Yeah.
an easier thing for him to do. To disseminate
Something might
that to
pop
you
up when we
guys.
get to that public hearing, but yes, thank you for that offer. Appreciate it, Philip. Okay, very good. Next on our agenda is the general public comment. Oh, thank you, Sheila. Mr. Jeff Hummel, would you like to come and address the council?
I would stay back there and talk. I've never been pulling quiet, but I know you want these things on. Hey, no complaints. I'm just here. I'm probably the most affected by the bridge, the culvert, University Trinity culvert replacement. My driveway is probably about 50 feet from it. Probably the closest one of the 4 of us that are on that corner. Nothing in particular. I've been working with Cliff. I want to thank him. He's been keeping me in the loop on things, and I do hope to stay involved as we go forward. Certainly safety and aesthetics are the 2 things I'm most interested in. So we don't end up with an ugly concrete structure sitting there. So hopefully we can find some things. I know you guys decided on, or at least preliminarily decided on option 2. I liked option 3 better personally, but I think 2 is probably a good answer since it saves us some money, and hopefully we can use some of that money for some of those aesthetics things we may want to do, some different railings or stamped concrete or something, whatever it comes down to. But just want to stay involved, and thank you guys, and carry on. Any questions, feel free.
Which house, if you're going north on Juniper, which one?
Over your shoulder.
Over the shoulder on the right?
Yeah, the one that has the driveway.
Up on a hill, okay.
Yeah, so that, literally that creek is right there.
It's right there, right. Okay, terrific.
Okay,
You bet.
Thanks, Jeff.
thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Jeff. Thank you. And Jeff is an engineer as well as a neighbor, so.
We have nothing on our agenda under old business, so we'll move on to new business, which consists of lots of public hearings. But first, we start with the Reconstruction Task Force appointment. Council, it's on page 16. And I believe, is it Cliff? Oops, no, it's not on page 16.
Yeah.
16.
16.
It is.
16.
Yeah, item 5, page 16.
You got funny page numbers.
You don't mind?
Oh, okay, sorry, the item title at the top got, okay, excuse me, yes, page 16. Cliff, Wes is going to handle this, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. This is something that we have to do annually. part of our community rating system scoring. This is established in section 12-69 of the town code, and it requires an annual appointment of the Reconstruction Task Force, which are activated upon the declaration of a building moratorium following a major storm event. The primary purpose is to receive and review damage reports and other analyses of post-storm circumstances, to discern appropriate areas for post-storm change and innovation. The representatives include 2 elected officials, 2 planning board members, town manager, myself, police chief, fire chief, SSCA president, CPOA president, and 1 representative from the construction community, which is, again, Mr. David Buchanan has volunteered to fill that role.
Very good. Thanks, Wes. Anybody have any questions for Wes? So, council, could I hear a motion to appoint the Reconstruction Task Force as presented by staff?
So moved.
We have a motion. Have a second?
Second.
Second? Any discussion? None? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now we have item number 6, public hearing final subdivision plat submitted by Matthew Casella to subdivide the property located at 267 Hillcrest Drive. And I'm handing the public hearing over to our able-bodied attorney, Philip Hornthal.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I now open the public hearing for the final subdivision plat submitted by Matthew Casella to subdivide the property located at 267 Hillcrest Drive. Call Mr. Hathaway.
Thank you, Mr. Hornthal. The next item on y'all's agenda is PSP-2201. This is approval of the final subdivision plat for 267 Hillcrest Drive. You'll recall at a previous meeting, you all reviewed the preliminary plat for this subdivision. The ordinance requires that for this kind of subdivision, that the preliminary plat goes to the planning board and town council, and the final plat goes to the planning board and town council. This final plat, there are no changes other than the ones that were requested in the conditions you all approved of the preliminary plat, which was basically to remove references to recombination and to add a certificate of approval for the planning board and the town council. Other than that, the ownership is the same, the lot sizes are the same, all the measurements, everything is the same. This is simply the final plat. Should you all approve it tonight, then the surveyor for Mr. Casella will draw up the Mylar plat, which is a specific material document, and the owner will sign it. The surveyor will sign it and seal it, and then the mayor and planning board chair will sign it representing the town. Then the owner will take it to the Register of Deeds for recordation, and it will be done. The planning board staff recommends approval of the final plat, and the town planning board approved it at the September 19th meeting. Any questions for me?
Is there anyone signed up to speak? Anyone here would like to speak? I'll now close the public hearing.
Thank you, Philip. Council, we've seen all of this material before, so I think it's pretty much a straightforward as presented. And so I need a motion to approve the
Final plat.
final plat.
Yeah, I move that we approve the final plat to subdivide the property located at 267 Hillcrest Drive.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any last discussion or questions at this time? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Okay. Next item of business is public hearing ZTA 2108, submitted by the town of Southern Shores to amend town code sections 36 to 57 and 36 to 165, and it's on page 20 in your books, council. I will now hand this over to our attorney, Philip Hornthal.
Thank you. I will now open the public hearing for ZTA 21-08, application submitted by the town of Southern Shores to amend town code sections 36-57 and 36-165.
Thank you, sir. The next item on y'all's agenda is ZTA-2108. It's almost exactly a year. In the month of November, you all considered this application November 9th, 2021. And if you all recall from that meeting, there were several comments during the public hearing. Most of them were related to the changes to the size of temporary signs for properties that were for sale or for lease or rent, or contractor signs. So ultimately, in November of 2021, you all, council, voted to send this application back to the town staff and the planning board for revisions, including in the vote, in your motion, allowing signs in the town right-of-way during campaign season. Town staff has made several revisions to this proposed language since November 2021. Those changes include, but are not limited to, allowing temporary signs in the right-of-way during campaign season with permission from the adjacent property owner or owners. Revised right-of-way during, revised the requirements for signs on properties that are for sale or lease, revised the definition of sign, revised the definition of temporary sign, revised the requirements for signs at major entrances to subdivisions, revised the requirements for wall signs in the commercial zoning district, and revised the requirements for temporary signs in all zoning districts. With this last version, the planning board considered it at the September 19th meeting, and they did recommend approval of it, and town staff recommends approval as well.
Very good. Thank you, Wes.
Thank you.
Is there anyone here that signed up to speak? Anyone here who would like to speak? Hearing none, I'll now close the public hearing.
Thanks, Philip. I want to just take a moment to thank the planning board for all their hard work on this particular revision of our town code. I want to thank staff for all of their hard work, and also our attorney for his review of the legal requirements of updating this particular ordinance. This is, a lot of work has been done on this revision, and I'm just very, very thankful that we're seeing the light at the end of this tunnel, because it's been a long road. So again, I just want to say thank you to Andy Ward, Tony DiBernardo, and all the rest of the planning board members, Wes, Cliff, and our attorneys, mostly Ben, but maybe some Philip. Thank you very much.
Having not been on the board then, I think this is really well done, reading what it was and the table that's set out now. I think it's very easy to follow for anybody. And it lays it out extremely well. After I reviewed it, I said, wow, this is a lot of work and it's well done. Well
Eliminated a lot of,
Yeah. Dupe and misunderstanding of what it did. Yeah. Eliminated it.
I mean, just one more thing, to write an ordinance that strikes a balance between trying to accomplish what we want to accomplish for the aesthetics of our town, but also recognizing people have free speech rights, also recognizing that the town needs to have an ordinance that they can use when necessary. And all of that, I think, has become or been worked into this in a pretty good balance. And so I'm very grateful.
Can we hear the legal dissertation about the Supreme Court case?
The legal,
yeah.
you want him to read the email?
I'm just curious.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
If somebody puts an offensive sign up, we had this off the cuff discussion earlier. What recourse the town might have? What's the difference between, I mean, if we can't regulate based upon content, and there's nothing in here that says content, but if there's a vulgar sign or.
You can't differentiate between various types of signs. It may be more restrictive on, in the Gilbert case, they were more restrictive on temporary signs for church and events like that than there were on signs for political and they had different size requirements for every sign. And if they think it's content-based, it's going to be presumptively unconstitutional and face a strict scrutiny test where you have to narrowly tailor, and those strict scrutiny tests, whatever the issue, they rarely survive constitutional review. And what I think you guys have done here has been very content neutral, and you've treated most signs the same way, and it's well done. And if you want to get down in the weeds about this, I could talk to you after, or you can, my email basically outlines the holding and the analysis of the Gilbert case. And essentially, they had 3 different types of sign ordinances for 3 different types of signs, and they were treated differently. And a church ultimately left their sign up longer than the hourly requirements for temporary signs for that particular type of conduct, and they got fined, and then they ultimately sued the town of Gilbert, and it made its way all through the federal courts all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court.
I'd be curious to read it. We don't need to talk about it.
Yeah. Cliff's got the email.
Okay.
I can send it to you if you don't.
Thank you, Philip.
All right.
And I'll just say I agree with Mark that the charts that are provided really clarify a lot. So I don't know who did all these charts, Wes, but the charts are good.
Well, specifically define, better definition between permanent and temporary. That's what I got out of it.
Or temporary permanent sign. How does this handle grandfather? Like if there's a current house sign that is greater than the square footage listed? Wes, I'm really asking you. Where did Wes go?
He's hiding behind the
I
podium.
can't see him.
Were you asking, is there a grandfather?
I mean, if somebody's in non-compliance, once this is adopted, what's going to happen to them?
Well, we looked at an amortization period,
Okay.
but that would have involved, according to Mr. Gallup, we would have had to have appraisals done, and to see if the town's interest outweighs the value. We didn't pursue that much further. But I would say that when this becomes effective, that it may create some nonconformities.
Okay.
But enforcement will be, as it always is, primarily complaint driven.
For signage, yes, ma'am, it's been primarily complaint driven.
We'll keep us posted if we need to adjust the size.
Yeah, what sign you adjusting?
I've got a couple in mind. I'm not going to mention them.
Yes, sir.
You'll see them. They'll start being apparent to you. I'm not the complainer.
Very good.
Thank you, Wes.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else have any comments or questions? Council, I need to ask for a motion to approve ZTA 2108 as presented.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Finally.
Carries 5-0. Thank you.
Yay.
Won't have to be collecting political signs.
We're up to number 8. Public hearing ZTA 2210. Page 40 in your books, Council. And I believe I'm going to hand this over to our town attorney, Philip.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I now open the public hearing for ZTA-22-10, an application submitted by the town of Southern Shores to amend Town Code Section 36-207C11. And again, invite Mr. Askew.
Thank you, sir. Next item is ZTA-22-10. On June 7th, you all recall that you adopted ZTA-2206, which addressed mixed-use group development of commercial and residential buildings. When that was adopted, and prior to that, recommended by the planning board, it incorporated the dimensional requirements for the C General Commercial Zoning District. When that was done, the language that was recommended by the board and ultimately adopted by council, 36-207C11I, addresses building height. And it comes from the building height requirements in the C General Commercial District. The building height requirements in the C General Commercial District are the same in every other zoning district. And somehow, some way, a sentence was left out of that building height requirement. There are two sentences to it, and I'll just read it. What was adopted was that maximum building height shall be 35 feet measured from the average of the existing undisturbed grade at the building corners. There's another sentence that was left out. If the average of the existing undisturbed grade at the corners of the building is less than 8 feet above mean sea level, the maximum building height may be measured from up to 8 feet above mean sea level. So therefore, town staff believes that omitting that second sentence was an oversight, should have been included in the requirements, and should have been adopted when it originally went through. The town planning board agreed, and they adopted they recommended approval of the ZTA at the September 19th meeting.
So this isn't changing anything, it's just keeping it consistent.
This is, well, it's changing C11, it's changing items in 36-207, C11, there are items A through, I think, L or M. And this is changing I. This is inserting that second sentence that was left out.
Right.
But so to speak, it's not anything new. It's what is carrying
Already.
forward what already applies everywhere else in the town, so to
It's
speak.
just actually defining it in the ZTA.
It is, yes, sir. It's putting the dimensional requirement in the requirements for this specific use, which is mixed-use group development of commercial and residential buildings, which a couple of y'all had questions and concerns about initially anyway. Well, here we are, but
Well, that was my question. Did you explore just getting rid of the dimensional requirements out of the use schedule?
out of the what schedule?
Out of this use schedule that they were added to?
In this case, we felt that we would just
I got you.
add the
not gonna
other
pick that scab.
missing sentence.
I bear responsibility for this. I should have fought harder in June. We wouldn't be here right now.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Is there anyone signed up to speak? Anyone here like
What?
to speak?
I have one other question. I'm imagining that you went through all the other dimensional requirements that were added and make sure there wasn't anything excerpted from that. From the
Yes,
other.
sir. This is as far as I can
This
tell.
is the only missing.
This is the only thing that's inconsistent. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Hearing no one here to speak, now close the public hearing.
Thank you, Philip. Council, any further discussion on ZTA 22-10 as presented?
I would like to make a motion to adopt ZTA 22-10 as approved by the planning board and presented by town staff.
Thank you. Can I hear a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any other discussion, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? ZTA 2210 passes. Thank you very much. Next on our agenda is number 9, consideration of RFQ for Trinity Juniper Bridge, page 46 in your books.
At your last meeting, you heard a presentation from Kimley Horn. You'd asked them to evaluate 3 alternatives to replace the culvert. Settled on alternative 2, which is a cord slab bridge. And at your last meeting, you asked us to come back with an RFQ so we could start soliciting for an engineer to design the bridge. And so that's what this is. I'll just point out a few things. In the description of the project, it reads, the town is seeking a qualified firm capable of providing planning and design services for a cord slab bridge for the Juniper Trinity Trail Bridge Replacement Project. The work will include, but not limited to, hydraulic design, geotechnical investigations with foundation recommendations, location and surveys, erosion control plans, roadway design, structure design, preparation of permit application, preparation of planning document, preparation of construction contract proposals, and estimates in utility conflicts. So I hope we've captured everything there. One note we need to ask for correction. At the bottom of page 47, you'll see that it's listed prior to submitting a letter of interest. That should be prior to submitting an RFQ. And then over on the next page, number 3, the statement of qualifications when it's due. If you all are comfortable with this, we would get this out as soon as tomorrow, and we would recommend at least 30 days for firms to respond. And so we would fill that blank in with all qualifications. Packages must be received by 2 p.m. November 5th, 22. Number 4 lists kind of some of the contents of the SOQ and how we're going to be evaluating these. And the evaluation team will be myself, the town engineer, the public works director, and the deputy town manager. So trying to really hone in on someone's capability. We've asked for a list of projects performed in the last 10 years, which indicate experience with the scope of work. We've asked them to include pictures of finished projects and note any projects in residential settings. Letter E under that, we've just asked them to describe in detail their firm's or person's experience in cord slab bridge design. So the other thing that most of it's boilerplate. The other part that I would bring your attention to is under number 7, the proposed schedule. Again, if you're comfortable with this and we can issue it, we would issue this as early as tomorrow. That next line can be just struck through. There's no deadline. There's no letter of interest. You can strike through that. We would give them until October 21st for any questions that they have, and give ourselves a week to respond to that. So October 21st would be the deadline for questions. October 28th would be our deadline to respond, and the deadline to submit would be November 5th. We'll advertise this locally. We'll advertise it. I've been speaking with the town engineer. There's a similar project going on in Elizabeth City right now. I mean, almost the exact same size, less residential, but so we'll put this in the daily advance in Virginian pilot in hopes of trying to get some widespread recognition. So, any questions?
What would be our, if we don't, excuse me, let me just restart. If we don't get the interest that we think we should be getting, what is our plan B, so to speak?
We could, if we don't feel as though we have someone we could recommend to you, we could resubmit.
Do it again?
Right.
Okay.
I
Do you have to come back for us to approve that, or can you just do that?
think we can just
I think you
do that. The
Okay.
plan would be if we do get someone qualified and we can make a recommendation to you, we'd make that at your December meeting and give you the reasons why, give you the score. This is how we rank them. This is why we're recommending this firm. And then, you can ask questions and see if you're comfortable with who we recommend.
Okay.
And even at that meeting, you may decide no, and we go back out.
Okay. Anybody want to ask questions of Cliff right now?
Does the people we had, Hanley, would they be one of the bidders? Or
Kinley Horn.
Kinley Horn, would they be one of the?
Yes, sir. I'm confident they'll submit.
Okay.
They have a head start.
Yeah. You mentioned the project in Elizabeth City. Do you happen to know the firm that got the,
I don't. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
I'm just
On
curious.
Providence Road.
Okay. Council, any questions for Cliff?
Just move forward.
All right, so we need a motion to approve the RFQ, Professional Engineering Services,
So moved.
Planning and Design
So moved.
Services. So
Second.
moved. Got a second? Second. Any more discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Cliff.
Thank you.
Number 10. We're into double digits tonight
Yes, ma'am.
for agenda items. Consideration of proposal, Jingite Trail Drainage Improvement Project. It's page 52, Council, in your book. Cliff?
Yes, last Thursday, we opened the bids for this project. We only received 2 bids. Envirotech and Fred Smith Company, and there's a pretty big difference between the two. The town engineer, his estimates are right in line with the low bid of Envirotech for $38,599.69. We're asking for you all to approve that, the budget amendment that's associated with this for the project on Gene-Gite that's going to lower the groundwater and make some capacity for rainwater. So if you approve this, we're asking you to approve the budget amendment. The funds would come out of fund balance, and we could get started on a contract, hopefully have this done by the end of the year.
Was there any, I mean, there was a tremendous spread between the two. Was there any reasoning from your point that
The
for that difference? I mean, that's a pretty big
Yeah.
one.
I think Fred Smith, who came in at 101,000. I think they're probably loaded up with work, and to fit this into their schedule, it was going to be costly. I think that Fred Smith wants to stay engaged with the town, and I think they want for us to see their interest. But for a project like this, I think they're probably doing bigger projects. Larger projects that maybe Envirotech can concentrate more, has the workload, the capacity to be able to do this. But I just don't think Fred Smith was interested in doing this job.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. But I didn't know if there was any other element in there. Environment Tech, have they had experience of doing this kind of work?
Yes, sir. This is what they.
That's what they do. I'm not familiar with them, other than I know of them.
Any other questions for Cliff?
Now we just need to get the project going.
Need a motion to approve budget amendment awarding Gene-Gite Stormwater Project to the lowest qualified bidder.
So moved.
Can I have a second? Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you very much. General public comment, would anyone like to comment that hasn't signed up? If something struck, somebody wants to talk?
Can I
Oh,
just
Cliff wants to talk.
back up real quick?
Yeah,
I'm not sure how to do this procedurally, but the motion you just made, I don't think it included the budget amendment.
oh, I thought I did.
Budget amendment number 15.
Motion to approve budget amendment, oh, I didn't do the number, sorry.
I'll make a motion to approve budget amendment number 15.
Number 15,
Second.
second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Opposed? Zero. Thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
sorry, just
Good
procedure.
public comment.
Now, public comment. Anything pop into anyone's head while they were sitting there? Okay. Council business. Our next regular meeting is Tuesday, November, oops,
We'll have to move it, won't we?
let's see.
Because that's election day.
It's election day, isn't it?
Yeah.
Tuesday, November 1st is not election day. Election day is
May
Tuesday,
1.
November 8th.
Oh, November
Yeah,
1.
second
Okay.
Tuesday, yeah.
So our next scheduled council meeting is November the 1st because we don't have a second meeting in October. Is that
Yeah.
correct, Cliff? That's correct. Okay. And we did hear, and we'll talk about it some more, the opportunity for us to get together on the 15th for the kickoff for the land use plan. And looks like I'm seeing some nodding heads, like people are going to try to make some room on their calendars for that. So that's wonderful. Appreciate that. That's kind of short notice, but I'm excited to get the land use plan update process kicked off. Let's see. Individuals' business. Matt, did you want to start us off tonight?
I don't usually have much business. Thank you all for coming.
Okay. Paula?
I'm going to just add, I'm sure the town attorney is going to keep all of us apprised of those oral arguments, but unless there's some prohibitions about attending, I may be interested in attending those.
Yes, ma'am. The only prohibition that we've been experiencing at the Fourth Circuit is they are really tight on code.
COVID, that's what I
And
thought.
I was asking a friend of mine who was arguing, there recently why that was with the count so low. And their explanation, at least at the Fourth Circuit, was that they've had people out with COVID and they're more worried about having to close the court down because people aren't able to come to work.
Right.
So, but I'm not saying that you can't get in, because technically you'd be a client.
That's true.
So,
Okay.
Do they require like a negative test before entry, or is it just masking and,
I think they required negative testing and masking
okay,
when my friend was arguing a couple of weeks ago.
Gotcha.
That's always subject to change.
okay.
Where's the courthouse located?
In Richmond.
Richmond.
Town.
Okay. Mark?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Leo?
I'll give you an update on tourism board and meals and occupancy. Meals for the month of July is up 9.2%. Current year-to-date is up 6.4%. Comparing to the same period back in 2019, that number's up 29%. The occupancy collections, and this is what's really interesting, it's the first time that they've exceeded 200,000 or 200 million in a month. July was up 27%. Current year to date was up almost 13%. But it was going back to July of 19, it's up 84%. But you got to somewhat keep in mind there's a little bit price increase in there too that is impacting it somewhat. Don't know how much, but that's a clarification. So even though it sounds good, I think somebody's paying a little more than they used to.
Is there any desire to try to ferret out how much of the cost increases?
They-
Because I mean, it's heads on the beach versus what they're spending when they get here.
That has been, I know Lee has brought it up, but we haven't had any
It's a hard
feedback.
thing to
It's a
probably
hard thing
figure
to
out.
come by, I think, is what we've been told.
Gotcha.
Not that it hasn't been on the radar screen.
Yeah.
And one other thing, if you will mark your calendars for November 11th, that is Veterans Day. The Knights of Columbus and the town are collaborating to have a Veterans Day program again. Starts at 11 o'clock. It's 11/11/11. So you'll see somewhat a little different in the Knights uniform. No longer are we allowed to wear the regalia we used to wear. And if we are found using it, we get disciplined. So we are not able to do it in the new uniform. Looks more like the Green Beret one. So there's a little, don't want to put all the dirty laundry out there on the lawn.
You just did. Good. I'm gonna Google it now.
Yeah, you can Google it. And I've had, and personally, I've introduced resolutions and they never, along with a bunch of others in the state, and we didn't get too far. So, but anyhow, don't let that be a deterrent. We're going to, we'll adapt. So anyhow, put it on your calendar and love to see you there to honor our veterans on Veterans Day. And that's all I got.
Thanks, Leo. Yeah, the Veterans Day ceremony is very special, and I'm glad that we do something here in town. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. As Matt already said, good to see you all here. And we will call this meeting to adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.